You know, when people say money talks, I say value talks, okay? And those things, in some instances, might be the exact fucking same. But what I'm talking about here is that in any scenario, when you're dealing with people or when you're, facing an issue, right, where someone has done something wrong and you haven't or whatever, value talks, right? Money talks, but value talks. And value is like, it can mean different things. And what I mean by this point, you guys, is that in many situations, it doesn't matter as much what is right or wrong or ethical or whatever. It really comes down to, once again, value talks. And specifically, what I mean is, like, if you've ever had a situation, right, where someone wronged you and there was a situation with multiple people around, this and that, and you felt like, okay, you should actually have been the one that people should have had, your back or whatever, but they didn't in that situation, then you can often trace that back to value talks, right? And that is because people fundamentally are survival mechanisms, okay? Everything we do, in first instance, our priority is to survive, right? So to do things that increase our chance of survival. And this is why I named this video Value Talks, because this is one of the most fundamental concepts of this whole fucking channel. Because most people don't understand this at a deep enough level, right? Because most people think that, when you meet people, it's about the connection you have with people, right? Or it's about like, how funny you are, or like, that type of shit. But, and even business scenarios and other things, value, once again, talks, okay? Value doesn't have to be the same for everybody, okay? Value is essentially something that I'd rather call perceived value, okay? Because it actually doesn't matter what something is. It matters what something looks like, okay? It matters what it is perceived as, okay? I was talking about this with a buddy to give you just a micro, funny example. Talking to a buddy of mine, and we were, he basically had to like, he accidentally messaged this girl something or called her accidentally or whatever. And look, he can say, oh, it was an accident or whatever. But once again, and this is very shitty, like micro example, but just to show you what I mean, what I'm talking about. He did that. What was it in reality, right? What was the action? The action actually was that he just dropped his phone and did it by accident, right? But, and he was at a point where with this, girl where he kind of wanted to like, be more aloof. And then he called her by accident. He was like, fuck, because once again, I told him, well, bro, it doesn't matter what it really was. It matters what it looks like, right? Because whatever you say now, it's going to look like, kind of like a chasing behavior. Because in that particular time, he wouldn't have wanted to do that, right? Anyways, you get what I mean. But people chase value around the fucking clock. And if you want to just be someone who is able to have relationships on their terms, have business deals on your terms, right? Then you need to understand the fundamental concept of perceived value. Because value can mean something else to every single person, right? To some people, value, right, will be much more in the line of, monetary value, like this guy has a lot of money, right? To some other people, value and that perceived value might be more so in the direction of this person has a lot of connections, a lot of social value in that sense. And to some other people, you might just be a big ass dangerous looking dude, and that might be valuable to them, right? And there's all these things are inherently usually valuable to most people, but it's just at a different scale, right? It has a different weight to it. And if you want to have those relationships on your terms, business deals on your terms, all of that type of stuff, because that's what I always talk about with you guys, right? On your terms. I don't fucking decide what you want, okay? You don't, nobody else around you decides what you want. You decide what you find valuable, cool, what you find the shit, what kind of life you want to live. I'm just here to give you the tools and the insights that I've personally learned from my experiences to help you be able to choose that. Because a lot of people, they don't do choosing, do they, right? A lot of people, they just actually do things that are the default setting, right? A lot of people just, in everything in their life, they go with the default program, okay? Like, as an example, they go to work, or they have, some sort of social circle in their town or whatever, and they meet a pretty girl through that, right? And that is now the default option, and that's like the first girl that they're really like getting deep with, and this and that, and now that's their wife, right? Now that's like their part. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, okay? But very often it is, right? Why is there so many fucking divorces? Well, if you ask me, it's because people choose out of scarcity. That to me is the biggest reason. People settle, right? Because they don't have all the options. And it's very easy to ask yourself, like, okay, if I were to have all the options in the world, would I then still make this choice? And I'm telling you, most fucking guys are too stupid, too stuck their own ass to just think in a hypothetical scenario. I cannot tell you how many friends I've had this conversation with, and how many, guys in general, in my network and whatnot, rich guys, successful guys, whatever, that just can't even do it, right? And what I mean by that, and how I know that, is that I've had conversations with guys that were like, fucking trying to get married and all this and all that, right? And I said, well, listen, you're really on the upward trajectory. You're here right now. You're in chapter like 2 of a 50 chapter book. If you're in chapter 25, right, aka here, would you still make the same choice if you have all these options? And then, they're like, oh yeah, I would. Okay, they make that choice. Now they're really like locked in with this woman, right? And by the way, a woman is just the best example of this, but it goes for various things. It goes for a job. It goes for a place to live, all of that type of stuff, right? It goes for a goddamn car. Even though that's, less appropriate of an example, because you can obviously switch them motherfuckers out. So anyways, then bro gets to chapter 25 of the book, and then he's like, oh shit, actually, now I have a lot of options. Dump her, right? And I'm telling you, like, this happens so goddamn often that it kind of makes you sick. Like, I'm just telling you, think clearly, right? In hypothetical scenarios of like, what would you want to do? What would you think if you were at that point where you had mastered yourself and you had all the options, right? And then choose from there. But that's not necessarily the topic of this video. So look, coming back to the value thing. People move towards value. Value is what creates attraction, fundamentally. And when I say attraction, that word doesn't just refer to guy and girl dynamics, right? It refers to what attracts people to people, okay? So, if you can think, even if you were in high school or at your job or like in any social scenario where there's like a lot of people around, then there was always usually certain, if you're a guy watching this, because I just checked, and the last video had 100% guys on that video, so I'm just going to talk about guys here. If you're a dude watching this, right, you also can remember, I know you can remember a time where you had a dude that you were like, oh, like he's a really cool guy, I want to really hang out with him, right? And when you would okay, this is gonna sound gay as shit, but when you would go kick it together and shit like that, like you'd be more excited about those plans than if you were just with like other dudes, whatever. Just a cool guy. Now why, right? Because that dude displayed communication, displayed value in whatever way that he did it, right? And so because of that value, you felt a magnetic pull. Now, once again, I'm not talking about attraction right now, as in just guy-girl, right? Attraction to a business deal can be the same thing, right? Attraction to, like, okay, why do you listen to this public speaker instead of that other one? Okay, so now a part of that is connection, right? In the sense of like, okay, you like that guy's or girl or speaker's style, right? But at the same time, a big, part of that is like, what value do they place on themselves and what value do you attribute to them because of that? Okay, because of how they communicate or other things that they have, right? A lot of people nowadays also display their social media, right? Like, for example, their Instagram in a very specific way, okay? Because they know if I post these kinds of pictures in this setting, in exactly this way, it displays 2, 3, 4, 5 points more value. Okay, now I'm not saying you have to be obsessed with this and always thinking about this constantly, because look, value talks, once again, but it doesn't mean that you need that thing to talk in every single scenario. So I also repeat this in videos, right? If you are like, you don't want to be obsessed with that. If you're just talking about, to your best friends and your family and this and that, you don't want to be fucking obsessed with that. But even in those scenarios, it can play a factor in how much these people, come to you, how much, they invest in you and this and that. Okay? But really fundamentally, you need to focus on building your value. Okay? And once again, as I've said in other videos, value is, how you communicate, right? How you carry yourself. And that's really the price tag you place on yourself. And you want to make that motherfucker goddamn expensive. And then the second thing is the external kind of value, right? So the external value is obviously like, how much money do you make? How much clout do you have? How much influence do you have? How many people do you know? Because if you master that, then people will just flock towards you, okay? If you have both, you will be unstoppable, okay? Because once again, value talks in this money, in this world, and money talks. And you want to focus on those things, and you want to just master that side of yourself where you have display and are that value, okay? And so once again, that's communication, and that's a combination of your communication and your external value, okay? So if you do that, you're gonna find that people start treating you very differently. And we often want, and in a much better way, and we often want to live in this fairy tale world of denying that that's just a big element, okay? It's not true, unfortunately. I've never met anyone that was just not influenced by that value dynamic, because it is programmed into humans' brains, right? So the point of this video, when I say like value talks, right? That means that, let's say that someone does something wrong, or someone does something kind of shitty or unethical or whatever. If that person, for you, in your perception, has a lot of value, right? And also value that, might be able to transfer over to you in some type of way, regardless, any of those two scenarios, you're gonna diminish what they did wrong, a lot, because that's how your brain works, right? And this comes from the, tribal times, when we were just in small groups of cavemen and women, right? Of like 50 people, 50 to 100 people, whatever it was. And in these groups, being aligned with the dude that's the leader of the tribe, right? That would increase your chances of survival dramatically. And, put it even in a stronger way, if you would be alienated from that group, and the best way to do that is to like get into a fight or get into a tussle with the main guy, if you'd be alienated from that group, you'd be absolutely screwed, right? Because in those times, if you were outside of the tribe, you couldn't survive, right? There's wild fucking animals. You can't like get food by yourself, right? You can't like hunt down a goddamn bear by yourself. It's just how we're wired, because that time, right, of us being in those caveman times, etc., was so much longer than those modern times where, we have cities and technology and all of that kind of stuff. So our brain, right, mostly our reptile brain, our subconscious mind, hasn't caught up to, these modern day times yet where those things are not applicable. So, you can always look at evolutionary psychology to explain modern day behavior and psychology, right? Of like, okay, why do people do the things they do? Why do people gravitate towards X, Y, Z, right? Because it increases their chances of survival subconsciously. Now, people will often, and I'm telling you, goddamn near always, say to you that it's not true, right? They say that they want, X, but really what they are motivated by is Y, okay? And the reason that there's a discrepancy between those two things, what they say they want and what they really want, and I'm not just talking about women here, because I know that you guys already fucking think that, but I'm talking about both, okay? Guys and girls alike. Now, I will admit that, women, because they're more emotional, have this more, okay? But it's both of us, okay? It's us too. So, motherfuckers, don't leave yourself out of it. Essentially, we will consciously want something, but subconsciously we're motivated by different things, right? And that's also where a lot of guys always get into trouble, with the opposite sex, is because, they will do things and they will behave in a certain way which they think, or the woman even tells them, or even like movies tell them, etc., of how they want to be treated, which is, being a nice guy, this and that, right? Being courteous, etc., buying her flowers, whatever, right? Doing those nice things. Now, that makes sense logically. If you're really fucking stupid, if you haven't figured that out at this point, then I don't know what's wrong with you, right? You seriously got to get your shit together. But there's levels to that, right? So I think we all know, it's been said a million fucking times at this point. I think we all know that like being overly nice is very bad, right? But then a lot of guys, they're neutral, right? If we're talking about guys to girls, right? A lot of guys, they'll be neutral, like they'll be just normal and nice, this, that. But we cannot deny the fact. Now, I'm not saying that I do this, right? Or a lot. Like, I think there's a balance in everything, right? But I'm just saying there's also the other side of it, right? So you can say, okay, you can talk about not being overly nice. So, okay, you're not buying her flowers. You're not doing all the super extra stuff. You're not buying her other shit, whatever, right? But then you also have and then you have just, so that's, if you're not doing that and you're just normal, then you're neutral. But then you also have the other things, right? Where it's like, okay, I'll tell you an example of the other side of things, which would go into the negative, right? But really it can be positive, right? So the positive would be like doing overly nice things, and then the negative would be doing negative things, okay? If we're just talking about it in that type of way. I had a girl that I was supposed to go on a date with, and I was like, at this kind of club thing. It was like an opening of a new thing, and I was just with a lot of people, this and that, and then, she rocked up, but I was just already there with so many people, and there were so many girls, and this and that, and she hit me up, and I just never even responded, okay? And honestly, I felt kind of bad about that, because I was like, damn, I let her come, like, dress up, do her makeup, do everything, come all the way there, and I literally didn't even respond. And she was like in front of the door waiting, and there was a big ass line, so you could only get in if I would like let you in, if you were me, right? So anyways, next thing you know is like, this girl like keeps hitting me up to go out to dinner and this and that still, right? And then we end up going to another place just with a group thing. I wasn't even talking about no one-on-one type stuff, right? Just a group thing. And then, there was another group thing, so I said, we can go there or whatever. And then she was literally like, oh yeah, but please don't like, like ghost me again when the time is there, this and that, right? And it just shows you like, okay, that negative thing put me in a much more positive light because it signals value, right? It sub-communicates value, right? So that's an example of something that you do that is in the negative, right? So it's very not nice. And coincidentally, another friend of mine, right? He had the exact same thing happen to him, like in the exactly around the same time. So that's why I remember this, because we actually spoke about that. We were like, man, it's so crazy, man. Like we literally did something that's like super shitty, in my opinion. If someone did that to me, I'd be fucking out the door, But then it actually worked in our favor, right? And it's crazy how that can happen and how that can work for you, right? So you just want to be aware of that. Now, I'm not saying that you need to like play games and act like that and this and that, but I'm saying that it should be something that you're aware of, because that is just how people work, okay? As soon as you like kind of like pull back, or as soon as you're focused on your other shit, and here's also a small side note, guys, right? That time that I'm talking about, I was literally at a restaurant opening. It was like quite exclusive, and I was just already around so many fucking people. So many people were coming there through me, right? So I was like, it wasn't even something that I really did on purpose. It was just like, I just was overloaded, you know what I mean? And I actually kind of felt shitty about it, you know what I mean? So that's how it happened. It wasn't even something that I did on purpose to like manipulate her and like make her like me more, because usually if you do it like that with that intention, it usually doesn't even work, because it like, you're actually trying to make that happen, right? And so people feel that kind of stuff. It's an energy thing, and it's also, you're usually then not in a situation where it makes sense for you to act like that. So anyways, I wasn't faking it. I wasn't even playing a game. It was like just my life, my reality, right? And that's why it came across in such a valuable way, because it was like, I'm even laughing about this, guys, because it's so ridiculous, isn't it, right? Why can't we all, I have this thought all the time, why can't we all just be fucking normal, right? It would be great. I'm a nice guy, okay? It'd be great if we all could just make a mutual agreement, like, hey, let's just all appreciate people that treat us well and, disregard people that don't treat us well. It'd be fucking great if everybody was on the goddamn same page about that. But unfortunately, for us and for them and for everybody, that's not how the world fucking works, okay? Because we have a reptile brain, a subconscious mind that is driven by value, and value usually comes from absence, right? Value comes from when you're not available. Value comes from when you do behave shitty, right? I'll give you another great example, okay? And this is, once again, all value talks, right? Another great example is when you go to a very luxurious restaurant or a very high-end club, how do people treat you? They treat you like shit, right? And if you want them to treat you better, then you gotta fucking be spending, right? Now, look, unless you rock up there and you know a lot of people and you have a lot of pre-established value, or like you go in there in a different kind of frame, right? So for example, not a buyer frame of like when you're going to a club just as some dude with your friends, like, okay, you're a buyer, right? You're gonna spend a lot, versus like when you go there because you have connections, this and that, the owner, the promoters and this and that. And now obviously nobody is like labeling you as that in their mind, so they're not putting you in that box, right? That's a different thing. But anyways, we don't have to go into that. The main thing I'm trying to talk about is luxury high-end stores even, right? If we're not even talking about clubs, like luxury high-end stores do the same thing, right? They often kind of like are trained to brush you off a little bit. Now they're semi-polite, but they kind of like don't give you a certain level of validation. And then as you buy more shit, they start validating you slightly more, right? They start looking at you a bit more, they start smiling a bit more, and it kind of subconsciously guides you into this path of buying more shit, because like you just get this validation more. And also, if they would like be completely nice and validate you completely right off the bat, then what would happen is you wouldn't have that you wouldn't have the pain to go away from, right? You would only have potentially pleasure to come towards. But once again, if that pleasure is already there, right, aka the validation and stuff like that, if we're just talking about that dynamic, obviously there's also the clothes and shit like that, but if we're just talking about the validation dynamic, if they've already given you that, then there's not much more to get there, so there's not much to go towards, and there's also no pain to go away from. But if it's not fully there, right, and this is literally how salespeople in luxury high-end stores are trained, if they're good, right, that if it's a little bit there but it's not fully there, then you also feel kind of like in a less authoritative position yourself to like deny things. Oh no, I don't like that, or this or that. And you'll see often enough people will just buy shit because they feel uncomfortable to not buy, right? Because they're like getting time from this person, they got a water, whatever, right? Like they're talking, like they're shown options, so they feel like pressured to buy something, okay? And then if the person is like, doing any sign towards buying something, then the clerk or the shopping assistant, whatever, they got like give them a little bit extra validation, right? Like they smile at them a little bit more, and then they guide them along this path, as I just mentioned, right? Now that principle is applied anywhere, right? It just is everywhere, okay? In sales, I often also talk about this, right? People are always obsessed in sales, right, with building rapport, okay? You can build rapport all day fucking long, but if you don't have the dynamic where the person views you as above them, so you're more authoritative, and what kind of example do I mean? I mean like, hey, let's say you're walking into a doctor's office, right? You'd be way less inclined to listen to the doctor if you're just buddy-buddy with this fucking guy, right? Instead, if this guy is like polite and kind, right? But he's authoritative, he speaks in a downwards tonality, he doesn't like go all the way into your story, he interrupts you when you're rambling for too long, right? in a polite way. He's like, okay, got it. But just to be clear, right? So something like that, right? You're going to respect that guy a lot more. Just think of the last time you went to the doctor. He probably kind of like behaved like that, because in that scenario, he does feel very authoritative and alpha, if you want to use that fucking word. But you get my point. And so value, once again, talks, okay? Value dictates what the weight of anything you do or say will be. Even if you do something nice for people, okay? Even if you give someone a fucking compliment, if you're coming from a place of a lot of perceived value, you know how people always say, oh, it means a lot coming from you. Well, it's not, nobody's gonna say that to you if you're the type of fucking guy that gives everybody a goddamn compliment, okay? Or that's always kind of nice, right? If you're the guy who even like gives someone's like negative compliments, right? So just negative statements about them, or like slightly bringing them down. And then sometimes you're like, you give a real genuine moment. You're like, dude, you know what? That's honestly pretty fucking cool. How exactly did you know what I mean? It is so much more powerful, okay? Once again, there's a balance. I don't mean, and I'm not saying here that you have to go out and constantly have this on your fucking mind and manipulate people and this and that. I always say this in every single video. I said it multiple times. The goal here is to understand all of this so you can basically go and deal accordingly and appropriately with people trying to influence you, right? And additionally, you have the skills and tools to influence others to your detriment, to your wants and needs. But then additionally, or more specifically, guys, the main point here is that all of this happens largely automatic, right? Almost all of it happens automatic if you come from a place of being where you are high value, right? Where you come from a place of where you slap a big old price tag on yourself, right? You are an expensive ass motherfucker, okay? And so then if you come from that, automatically you're gonna behave in these, valuable ways, perceived value ways, right? So go ahead and give this a fucking test run, right? Go throughout your day, pick up a coffee somewhere, do this, do that, and just play with these dynamics, right? If you visualize this thing, right, this spectrum, where this is the dead center, this is extremely valuable, right wing, this is extremely nice and basically a beta male on the left wing, them fucking Democrats. I'm happy Trump won, right? But you might have been here, right, for the past weeks, or how you behave towards people. Go ahead and give it a shot to just be here, right? Just over the balance here, okay? Just go in a little bit more extreme here and see what happens, okay? See how people treat you differently if you're just a little bit more aloof, if you're a little bit more ignoring people sometimes, if you're a little bit, because think about it, celebrities usually, now look, there's also very nice celebrities, this and that, but it's definitely an attribute. It's something that people think about with celebrities, is that they got their hoodie on, they got their sunglasses, and they're like, they're like that. They don't really give people too much, right? And if you act like that, right, then people will just attribute more value to you. I've given this example in another video, but there was a YouTube video that some pranksters did, and they basically acted like rich, snobby kids, right? And they pretended that they have super powerful parents, whatever, and they skipped the line, and they said like, oh, we got to refer this and that, and everybody was just treating them like they were fucking royalty because they acted like it, right? So once again, act like a rock star, get treated like a rock star. But then additionally, you don't want to forget about the fact that that won't always last, because, for example, with those pranksters, right? If then people find out, oh, you're not actually that, then that largely disappears, right? So that's one part of it, the communication. But then the second part is building your actual value, okay? And you need to have both, right? Both are kind of equally important as far as how to get stuff, from other people in a social dynamics aspect. But building your own value is obviously more important in general, because that's for you. That's not just to impress other people, right? That's not the reason that you should be getting money or, becoming ripped or whatever, right? The reason you should do that is because of yourself, and because you want to do that for yourself as well, right? And it can be a part of your motivation, but it shouldn't be all of it, okay? But that's why I'm saying that that's actually more important. So I just want the main message of this video to be what I intended it to be and what I want it to be, is that value talks, right? So like you just need to understand that value leads in any situation in life. When you think you had that great connection with that girl, it's happened to me as well, right? I'll be completely honest. I've had times when I was like with a girl, and to be fair, this is years ago, but that this happened for the last time. But that I'm like, oh, she's such a sweet girl, and this is kind of like a princess type girl, and I put her in a different box, and now I'm like not myself because I'm like uh, like linking her to someone from the past, whatever, right? And then I'm putting her in a box where she's like a good girl, this and that, right? And I'm like not being my true self because of that. I'm just remembering one specific example, and it was just hilarious because my friend already said, "No, bro, you got this all wrong. Like she's not like what you think she is like, right?" And he didn't know her or nothing, but he just got that vibe, and he is also someone that's an advanced kind of guy in this. And then what ended up happening? This girl actually went with some fucking fully tatted up promoter type dude who has fucking jack shit going for him, right? But just like a typical kind of like promoter fuckboy dude, because obviously he behaved normally with her because he wasn't putting her in that box or whatever. And I never do that, but that's like an example that I thought of, right? Because a friend of mine, we recently talked about that. And so, anyways, you want to just be aware that value always talks, and it basically washes over. It's above connection or shit like that. Okay, like the value always comes above the connection. Why? Because that's ingrained in your subconscious mind so fucking hard, right? That you just move towards that. If you've ever heard of a concept called the halo effect, right? And this is something I always say around my friends and this and that, because it's just a funny thing. But we have a little inside joke with it. But the halo effect essentially means that when someone has value, right? And if you look it up, I believe that it's going to say if they're very good looking, for example, right? But let's say that if they're very rich or they're very good looking, like they have some display of extreme value, then everything else about them becomes a lot more, becomes just a lot better, okay? So all of a sudden you can't see their flaws because you're only focused on the good things that they have. Once again, that is a survival mechanism. Why? Because if someone has one thing that, or something about them that's extremely valuable, right? Your brain goes like, oh, let's make him more valuable in this guy's mind, right? So that like we're gonna connect with him and we're gonna like treat him accordingly to be safe with him because he's probably a leader of some shit, right? And that will keep us safe and make us survive more, right? It will increase our chances of survival. Another example of this, if someone is just massive, right? Like big ass, tatted up black dude or something, right? Like scary looking motherfucker, Russian fucking guy, whatever. And I walk into a bar. I saw this a video about this one time at like some social experiment, very long time ago. I just remember it. And this guy, like, it was actually like some small, normal looking dude that like took someone's beer in the bar and then just like tried to drink it. And then there was like this big ass dude. Now, look, this is very logical, but once again, this is where it's a more logical example. But you're gonna actually see how this. It's just a more clear example of the other things that we've talked about today. Then the big guy does it, right? And the difference between the two is with the smaller guy, like the guy, the guy who owned the beer was like talking all this shit and like getting up. And then with the bigger guy, most people just didn't say shit, okay? Like nothing. But also like you might say, okay, that's just because they're scared, this and that. But in a more normal scenario, what you'll often find is like people who are like them fucking scary looking dudes, if they have that type of value, right? Then people will be nicer to them. They'll talk to them in a different way, just because subconsciously they place more value on them, once again, right? Than some normal ass looking dude. That's also a type of value, right? So value influences everything. It influences how much you like someone. It influences what you think about them. It influences what you think about their actions. It goes the other way around, right? And it's the leading factor in your judgments of people, etc. I'll even tell you this. There have been experiments where they basically did court cases and experiments like that, right? Where they tested out, like, hey, what if someone looks uglier versus someone who looks extremely attractive? And the conclusion of the study was that the more attractive person on average would get like X many years less sentence from the jury than the person who is an ugly ass motherfucker. Okay? And that should just tell you right there that value is leading, because once again, it's a survival mechanism. If you see someone that's that attractive, subconsciously you place more value on them, right? Because these facial features mean that they're more strong, healthy, this and that, right? And also in our today's day and age, someone who's very attractive just automatically has more value, right? So it's that type of value, and therefore you're going to treat them better because once again, they have more value. It's just how the world works. You got to accept it and you got to deal with it. And all of the things that I've mentioned in this video, these things will help you do that, okay? And another thing that I'll say to you is like, something that I always think about, especially in like romantic relationships, is if I was Leonardo DiCaprio, would she, do it then? Or would she then not do it? Or whatever, right? Depending on the action. And that gives you a real quick answer where you lie on the value scale, okay? So, if you hold yourself by that standard, okay, and by the way, I'm saying that's very prevalent in a dating scenario, but it's extremely prevalent too in a sales scenario, right? Or in a business scenario, in networking, or with other guys, right? If you're talking in a business network, right, and you ask yourself, hey, if I was Jeff Bezos, would this happen then? Now, the reason it's not as prevalent there is because Jeff Bezos has 200 billion, 150, 100, whatever it is, billion fucking dollars, right? So there's that external thing. Now with Leo, it's as well, but like in a dating scenario, it's more of the emotional value, right? So that's one side note I gotta make there. If it's man to woman, woman to man, it's more about the emotional experience, the perceived value of the emotional experience you can give her when you're with her and without her. It's not necessarily as much about the external value, even though that can help, okay? But there it's a bit different, right? So it's not the same across the board. But anyhow, that question, right, of like, okay, if I was Leo DiCaprio, if I was like whoever, would they treat me like this then? If the answer is no, then you shouldn't be continuing that. Or you should be changing your value, right? And changing your standards mostly. Because I've seen a lot of guys that just have a low standard because they just don't know any better, right? Because they just they haven't even had the reference experience of someone treating them like an absolute king or an absolute celebrity, right? And I'm just saying celebrity, guys, because it's easy. It's not like I put celebrities on the pedestal, but just in general in society, that's what's often done. And that's just an easy thing to understand, okay? But anyways, if you ask yourself that, then you can come up with these answers real quick, right? So you're not gonna take all these actions, like do all this, do all that, come to the person, do that, okay? Would the same happen if you were Leo DiCaprio, okay? Hold yourself to that standard. Now, obviously, sometimes you need to give a little bit of time for someone to understand and see your value. You can't just rock up to someone and in the first 5 seconds think that they're gonna perceive you as valuable as someone like that, right? Because you haven't displayed anything yet, okay? It's all gonna be up to your communication and any external value or like how other people treat you, okay? That's the main two things that someone actually judges your value on, okay? If we're talking about man to woman, it's like how you behave, your sub-communication, right? How confident you are, how aloof you are, this and that, and then how other people react and respond to you, okay? So other people in the environment, whatever, if they're all like very, supplicative to you, etc., trying to do things for you, then that signals that you're a very fucking important person, that you have a lot of value, right? And then the third piece within that whole attraction thing is like actually the connection, right? So being a match, but that will happen if you have the value almost all of the time. That's why I always say, like, how all these fucking lame ass dudes on the internet are saying like, oh, there's no good women anymore, blah-de fucking blah. Mate, you have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. Because if you have that value, any woman, right? Maybe like there's a 99, there's like a 1 percentile that's not gonna fuck with it or whatever, right? But if you have that value, then okay, maybe it's, even if it was 80%, right? Like an 80-20 principle. Like most of the women, they will actually act exactly and behave exactly like you would want them to, because that's, how people's minds work when you're dealing with someone who you perceive that has extreme value, you start behaving in a way, or they, right, start behaving in a way that they know subconsciously you will like, right? And then you're all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you're gonna find all of these super feminine women, super nice women, right, that are exactly your type. How? Did they appear out of nowhere? Did all of a sudden America get infiltrated with Latin American women who have the perfect type? No. Okay, that's not what fucking happened. What happened is just that now you are, having relationships where the other person is viewing you as extremely valuable, right? Because of your subcommunication, because of how other people respond to you, and partially, right, smaller piece, because of your external value. And so that's a much smaller piece than the first two. And so therefore, everybody all of a sudden is your type, okay? Do you think Leo has any trouble like finding, beautiful, smart, intelligent women that, he's into? I don't think so. Anyways, look, not to make this a whole dating video, but it's just a great example of how this, plays a big role, but also in all of these other things, right? Like if you're a very valuable dude, and for males, right, and for networking and for business, it is much more rational, right? So it's much more, not all, right, but it is more rational, because that's just how we are wired, right? So we're more so like, okay, does this dude have a lot of money, have a lot of connections, have a lot of fame, have a lot of knowledge that I want, whatever, right? Okay, I see the value, right? And then it happens like that. But it's additionally very largely also the confidence and the how you communicate your value. But it's more logical than the other side of things, okay? But in there, it also plays a huge factor, right? It's the exact same thing. You could be treating a friend of yours amazingly well, right? But you just have a lower perceived value, right? Or a lower value in general than this other guy who treats him much less well, right? Within your network, within your whatever the fuck it is, okay? And this guy gets way more back, right? Because his actions mean so much more, because he has more value, he has more perceived value, right? Because of the two things that I've mentioned, okay? The communication and the external one. So realize this, right? Realize that value runs the motherfucking world, okay? Value changes everything. Value is like the frame, okay? So if you have a painting, let's say this, you know how some people can make a painting and, Van Gogh, whatever, it's going to be worth like 50 M's. And then some people make a painting that might be just as good, but they just don't have a name. It's not hung in a beautiful museum, etc., etc. So the frame is different, so it's not worth shit, okay? It's not worth 10 bucks. So they've also done these experiments. I can't remember all the shit. I've just seen it sometime. I know that it has been done where, some unknown artist, right, and some like random ass painting, but they hang it in a beautiful frame, right? That's around the thing. And they hang it in a beautiful museum, right? Or like an art gallery where people go to buy things, and that's very established. And they put a dude there who's a very reputable person who's like interested in it. Now, there's three big signs of value there, right? And the big sign of non-value is the fact that the artist is completely unknown. The name there is completely unknown, can't really find them online, this and that, right? But there is three other very strong signs of value, right? So then random rich people, random businessmen go into this art gallery, and the painting ends up getting sold for like 30 grand or something like that. I don't know exactly, right? This is not from my memory. I just know there has been shit like this done. Now, and even if there wasn't an experiment like this done, I can tell you for a fucking fact that it could be done. So the reason that is because the perceived value of that fucking painting just skyrocketed because there were three honest signals, right, that signaled that this painting was very valuable, okay? And you can apply this concept to yourself as well. You can put yourself in an environment. You can put yourself next to another person. You can put yourself, if you're rich, right, you can slap on an expensive watch, right? Those types of things are all signals that you have value. Now, the watch thing, that's not going to really help you with women, right, necessarily, but it will help you with other guys. And then if you were deemed as very valuable by other guys in that environment or at the table, whatever, then they're going to treat you with a lot of respect, and that is what the woman then is going to see. So it's a second order consequence, okay? It's not directly influenced, because they don't even really care about that much, unless you have a gold digger who's not the type of chick that you usually are gonna want, right? I don't know what kind of shit you're into, but that's not what this channel is about. So anyways, it's a second order consequence. You gotta understand, how do you walk into a room, and how do you then influence that environment to get the things that you want, right? What I always talk about is that you wanna get to a place where you're simply doing things that are workable for the results that you desire. That's what I always say, right? So don't judge the world, don't judge people, don't judge people's brains and how they work, okay? Just simply think about the rules of the game, okay? How people are wired, and how you can use that to get what you want in life, okay? And then once again, I always give you the side note there of like, that doesn't mean you're gonna manipulate the fuck out of your best friends and family, okay? You're not. You wanna have real relationships. But I'm talking right now about just more of the actual result side of things, where you're trying to move up in things, you're trying to get business deals done, you're trying to get relationships on your terms, right? And that type of stuff, okay? Because I can tell you I've been extremely successful in that side of my life, even when I didn't have any money or clout or any other external value things to use to my advantage, all right? And then you also can use this mindset and this methodology of value, right, to drastically get more external value. Because if you show up with that confidence, etc., people are gonna. I remember when I first started my business, I had a marketing agency. That was my first business. So what I did, I was a high school dropout at 18 years old, sleeping on couches with friends, you know, with a lot of bullshit that I'd done in my past. And I was like, shit, man, I gotta fucking set my shit straight. I gotta make some shit happen, you know. I got like just a lot of like illegal shit that I'd done, etc., etc. And I also didn't want to do school and nothing like that. And I got into a lot of fights, and I just like got expelled and this and that. And I got into some issues there. And then I was just like, okay, I'm gonna start this business thing. I saw about it online. I'm just gonna do this, right? And all I did, man, was I just rang up. I called businesses, right? And I just went there, and I just literally went there on a fucking push bike. And I went there in the train, okay? So I went with my push bike to the fucking train, and then I took the train to the main city, Amsterdam. I live very close to Amsterdam, or like to Utrecht or whatever, like all these other places where there was like gyms that I would have called. And then I would go in there with a fucking 7 or like a 10-year-old Dell computer that was like thick as a fucking, like this, right? Like this realistically. And you know, I would just rock up, and I would just try to dress as nice as possible, and I would just go in there, and I would just completely fake it till you make it. I was just relying on pure confidence. I had 0 client results to show them. I didn't even have a fucking website to show them. I didn't have a business card. I actually did have a business card, but it was just a very shitty one. I didn't have nothing, right? But I just went in there, and I remember like a specific couple of gyms that weren't just gyms. There was like these very luxury high-end studios, and I would just go in there, and I would just act like I was the motherfucker, right? I would respectful and everything, but I would just act very confident, right? And it was just pure like confidence that got me into those rooms and got me deals there, right? Like multi-million dollar businesses, etc. Like these very luxury high-end kind of spas with gyms attached and shit like that, right? So anyways, that's how I would do it, right? And I remember specifically one time, I was an 18-year-old high school dropout kid, and I went into this gym, and I had a meeting there with the 2 founders, and then, you know, somewhere in the meeting they asked me like, oh, okay, so you're moving, because I told them I'm moving to Amsterdam, this and that, and then they said, oh, are you buying a place here in the center? Which, bro, that's super expensive, okay? Plus, obviously, I was just an 18-year-old high school dropout. I barely made any fucking money, and you know, I was nowhere near a place where I could just buy a house. And I remember that I said that to this coach that I hired back then. I said like, yeah, I was actually. I walked in there with a lot of confidence because they actually asked me this, right? Like, oh, are you buying a house here? And that signals that they viewed me as someone who was definitely not an 18-year-old little high school dropout, but someone who was at least like, you know, at least 27, at least, because, you know, otherwise it's not really realistic to like be buying a house there, right? So anyways, that's what it'll do for you. And I walked away with a fucking, you know, really good deals. Like I was charging $1,000 a month for my fee for running some advertisements, and then $500 a month or $750 a month for the ad spend. And then after that, I increased it. I went to like $1,500 a month, and I closed deals for like $3K a month for like 2 locations, shit like that. Now, look, there's people that have done greater things. There's people that have done bigger things. But for me, it was a big deal, coming where I came from. And that all, or like largely that just happened because I just like knew how to communicate and how to put myself, how to make myself perceived as that, right? Now, I would never lie about it, by the way. Okay, so if someone would ask me, I would just very roughly and hard tell them, no, I'm 18 years old. No, I haven't done any college, but I know how to get fucking results here, right? And that's what you care about. So anyways, that's just a business example there. Value leads, value talks, okay? And a part of that value can be money because money talks, but it's not always the only and main part. It depends on the situation, but I can tell you, money is extremely, extremely powerful. Money and fame, the value that puts on you, right, is extremely high. But I'm only saying, right, so focus on that. Get it, okay? Go get it, man. I'm not the type of dude who's gonna be here and say like, oh yeah, man, just work on your confidence and it's all your internal thing and just meditate. Like, that's bullshit, man. The external thing could be so extremely fucking valuable. And if anything, I want you to focus on that way more. Just focus on that, right? And then get the internal shit afterwards or doing or whatever, right? Or you could, if you already have it, that's great. For me, I already had it beforehand, before I got anything, right? Which is the best, but that is more important because it's for you, and that's, during that, work on the internal confidence because that is also going to help you get that external shit. But external shit, do that, okay? Focus on that. And with that being said, value leads, value talks, motherfucker. We should make that a show, shouldn't we? All right? Leave a little like, okay? Leave a little comment because that shows me how valuable this video was to you.